But what happened next was such a bedlam that I could not keep it all in my memory, for a great many woke up at once. An official, a civil councillor, woke up and began discussing at once the project of a new subcommittee in a government department and of the probable transfer of various functionaries in connection with the subcommittee, which was very greatly interested the general. I must confess I learnt a great deal that was new to myself, so much that I marvelled at the channels by which one may learn marveled at the channels by which one may sometimes in the metropolis learn government news. Then an engineer half woke up, but for a long time muttered absolute nonsense, so that our friends left off worrying him and let him lie till he was ready. At last the distinguished lady, who had been buried in the morning under the catafalque, showed symptoms of the reanimation of the tomb. Libenzianov, for the obsequious lower court councillor whom I detested, who lay beside the General Petriadov, was called, it appears, Libenzianov, became much excited and surprised that they were all waking up so soon this time. I must own I was surprised too, though some of those who woke up had been buried for 3 days, as, for instance, a very young girl of 16 who kept giggling in a horrible and predatory way. Your Excellency, Privy Councillor Tarasevich is waking, Libenziatnikov announced with extreme fussiness. What? What? The Privy Councillor, waking up suddenly, mumbling with a lisp of disgust. There was a note of ill-humoured peremptoriness in the sound of his voice. Excuse me. I listened with curiosity, for during the last few days I had heard something about Tarasevich, shocking and upsetting in the extreme. It's I, Your Excellency. So far, only I. What is your petition? What do you want? Merely to inquire after Your Excellency's health. In these unaccustomed surroundings, everyone feels at first as were oppressed. General Petriovoidov wishes to have the honor of making Your Excellency's acquaintance, and hopes. I've never heard of him. Surely, Your Excellency, General Petriovoidov Vasilovich. Are you General Petriovoidov? No, Your Excellency. I am only the lower court councillor Libenzianov at your service. But General Pervoyedov. Nonsense, and I beg you to leave me alone. Let him be. General Petrodoyov at last himself checked with dignity the disgusting officiousness of his sycophant in the grave. He is not fully awake, Your Excellency. You must consider that. It is the novelty of it all. When he is fully awake, he will take it differently. Let him be, repeated the general. Vasily Vasilich! Hey, Your Excellency! A perfectly new voice shouted loudly and aggressively from close beside Ariodotyov Ignatiev. It was a voice of gentlemanly insolence, with the languid pronunciation now fashionable, and an arrogant drawl. I've been watching you for the last 2 hours. Do you remember me, Vasily Vasilich? My name is Klinovich. We met at the Volsnoy's, where you, too, were received as a guest. I am sure you don't know why. I am sure I don't know why. What? Count Petro Petrovich? Can it really be you? At such an early age? How sorry I am to hear it. Oh, I am sorry myself, though I really don't mind. I want to amuse myself as far as I can everywhere, and I'm not a count, but a baron, only a baron. We are only a set of scurvy barons, risen from being flunkies. But why I don't know, and I don't care. I am only a scoundrel of the pseudo-aristocratic society, and I am regarded as a charming polisson. My father is a wretched little general, and my mother was at one time received en honte. With the help of the Jew Ziefel, I forged 50,000 ruble notes last year, and then I informed against him, while Julie Carpentier de Lucien carried off the money to Bordeaux. And only fancy, I was engaged to be married to a girl still at school, 3 months under 16, with a dowry of 90,000. Atadoyev Ignatiev, do you remember how you seduced me 15 years ago when I was a boy of 14 in the Corps de Pages? Ah, that's you, you rascal. Well, you are a godsend. Anyways, for here, you were mistaken in suspecting your neighbor, the business gentleman, of unpleasant fragrance. I said nothing, but I laughed. The stench came from me. They had to bury me in a nailed-up coffin. Ugh, you horrible creature. Still, I'm glad you are here. You can't imagine the lack of life and wit here. Quite so, and I intend to start here something original. Your Excellency, I don't mean you, Peredov. Your Excellency, the other one, Tarasevich, the Privy Councillor. Answer, I am Klinovich, who took you to Mademoiselle Fury and Lent. Do you hear? I do, Klinovich, and I'm delighted. Trust me. I wouldn't trust you with a halfpenny, and I don't care. I simply want to kiss you, dear old man. But luckily I can't. Do you know, gentlemen, what this Grandpère's little game was? He died 3 or 4 days ago, and would you believe it? He left a deficit of 400,000 government money from a fund for widows and orphans. He was the sole person in control of it for some reason, and so that his accounts were not audited for the last 8 years. I can fancy what long faces they all have now, and what they call him. It's a delectable thought, isn't it? I have been wondering for the last year how a wretched old man of 70, gouty and rheumatic, succeeded in preserving the physical energy of his debaucheries. And now the riddle is solved. Those widows and orphans, the very thought of them must have egged him on. I knew about it long ago. I was one of the only ones who did know. It was Julie who told me, and as soon as I discovered it, I attacked him in a friendly way at once in Easter week. Give me 25,000. If you don't, they'll look into your accounts tomorrow. And just fancy, he had only 13,000 left, so it seemed it was very apropos his dying now. Grandpère, do you hear? Cher Klinovich, I quite agree with you. There is no need for you to go into such details. Life is so full of suffering and torment, and so little to make up for it, that I wanted to at last be at rest, and so far as I can see, I hope to get all I can from here too. I bet that he has already sniffed catchy Berestkov. Who? What catchy? There was a rapacious quiver in the old man's voice. Aha! What's catchy? Why, here on the left, 5 paces from me and 10 from you. She has been here for 5 days, and if only you knew, Grandpère, what a little wretch she is. Oh, of good family and breeding, and a monster, a regular monster. I did not introduce her to anyone there. I was the only one who knew her. Catchy, answer! He! The girl responded with jangling laugh, at which there was a note of something as sharp as the prick of a needle. He. And a little blonde? The Grandpère faltered, drawling out the syllables. He. I have long, the old man faltered breathlessly, cherished the dream of a fair little thing of 15 in just such surroundings. Ach, monster! Cried Erudoitov Aganatyev. Enough! Klinovich decided. I see that there is excellent material. We shall soon arrange things better. The great thing is to spend the rest of our time cheerfully. But what time? Hey, you government clerk, Libanovska's, or whatever it is. I hear that's your name. Semen Yevanichkis Libanovskov, lower court councillor at your service. Very, very much delighted to meet you. I don't care whether you're delighted or not, but you seem to know everything here. Tell me first of how it is we can talk. I've been wondering ever since yesterday. We are dead, and yet we are talking and seem to be moving, and yet we are not talking and not moving. What jugglery is this? If you want an explanation, Baron, Platon Nicovich will give you one better than I. What? Platon Nicovich? Is that? To the point. Don't beat about the bush. Platon Nicovich is our homegrown philosopher, scientist, and master of arts. He has brought out several philosophical works, but for the last 3 months he has been getting quite drowsy, and there is no stirring him up any more. Once a week he mutters something utterly irrelevant. To the point, to the point. He explains all this by the simple fact, namely, that when we were living on the surface we mistakenly thought that death there was death. The body revives, as it were. Here, the remains of life are concentrated, but only in consciousness. I don't know how to express it, but life goes on, as it were, by inertia. In his opinion, everything is concentrated somewhere in the consciousness, and goes on for about 2 or 3 months, sometimes for even half a year. There is one here, for instance, who is almost completely decomposed, but once every 6 weeks he suddenly utters one word, quite senseless, of course, about some bobok. Bobok is small beans. Bobok, bobok! But you see that an imperceptible speck of life is still warm within him. It's rather stupid. Well, how is it I have no sense of smell, and yet I feel that there's a stench? That, well, on the point of our philosopher is quite a bit foggy. It's apropos of smell, he says, that the stench one perceives here is, so to speak, moral, It is a stench of the soul, he says, that in these 2 or 3 months it may have time to recover itself, that is, to speak, the last mercy. Only, I think, Baron, that these are the mystic ravings, very excusable in his position. Enough! All the rest of it, I am sure, is nonsense. The great thing is that we have 2 or 3 months more life, and then bobok! I propose to spend these 2 months as agreeably as possible, and so to arrange everything on a new basis. Gentlemen, I propose to cast aside all shame. Ah, let us cast aside all shame, let us, many voices could be heard saying, and strange to say, several new voices were audible, which must have belonged to others newly awakened. The engineer, now fully awake, boomed out his agreement with a peculiar delight. The girl Catchy giggled gleefully. Oh, how I long to cast off all shame, Atradoyev Ignatiev exclaimed rapturously. I say, if Atradoyev Ignatiev wants to cast off all shame. No, Klinovich, I was ashamed up there all the same, but here I should like to cast off shame. I should like it awfully. I understand, Klinovich, boomed the engineer, that you want to rearrange life here on new and rational principles. Oh, I don't care a hang about that. For that we'll wait for Kudnyarov, who was brought here yesterday. When he wakes, he'll tell you all about it. He is such a personality, such a titanic personality. Tomorrow they'll bring along another natural scientist, I believe, an officer for certain, and 3 or 4 days later a journalist, and, I believe, his editor with him. But deuce take them all. There will be a little group of us anyways, and things will arrange themselves, though meanwhile I don't want to be telling lies. That's all I care about, for that is the one thing that matters. One cannot exist on the surface without lying for life, and life and lying are synonymous. But here we will amuse ourselves by not lying. Hang it all, the grave has some value after all. We'll all tell our stories aloud, and we won't be ashamed of anything. First of all, I'll tell you about myself. I am one of the predatory kind, you know, all that was bound and held in check by rotten cords up there on the surface. Anyways, with cords and away with cords, and let us spend these 2 months in shameless truthfulness. Let us strip and be naked. Let us be naked, cried all the voices. I long to be naked, I long to be, Atradoyeva Ignatiev shrilled. Ah, I see we shall have fun here. I don't want Ecce after all. No, I tell you, give me a taste of life. He, giggled Catchy. The greatest thing is that no one can interfere with us, and though I see Petradoyev is in a temper, he can't reach me with his hand. Grand-père, do you agree? I fully agree, fully, and with the utmost satisfaction, but on condition that Catchy is the first to give us her biography. I protest with all my heart, General Petradoyev brought out firmly. Your Excellency, the scoundrel Libanovkos persuaded him in a murmur of fussy excitement. Your Excellency, it will be to our advantage to agree. Here, you see, there's this girl, and all their little affairs. There's the girl, it's true, but it's to our advantage, Your Excellency. Upon my word it is, if only as an experiment. Let us try it. Even in the grave they won't let us rest in peace. In the first place, General, you were playing preference in the grave, and in the second, we don't care a hang about you, drawled Klinovich. Sir, I beg you not to forget yourself. What? Why can't you get at me? Why, you can't get at me, and I can tease you from here as though you were Julie's lapdog. And another thing, gentlemen, how is he a general here? He was a general there, but here is a mere refuse. No, no, not mere refuse, even here. Here you will rot in the grave, and 6 brass buttons will be all that will be left of you. Bravo, Klinovich, ha ha ha, roared the voices. I have served my sovereign. I have the sword. Your sword is only fit to pick mice, and you never drew it even for that. That makes no difference. I formed a part of the whole. There are all sorts of parts in the whole. Bravo, Klinovich, bravo, ha ha. I don't understand what the sword stands for, boomed the engineer. We shall run away from the Prussians like mice. They'll crush us to powder, cried a voice in the distance that was unfamiliar to me, that was positively spluttering with glee. That, the sword, sir, is an honor, the general cried, but only I heard him. There arose a prolonged and furious roar, clamor and hubbub, and only the hysterical, impatient squeals of Atradoyev Ignatiev were audible. But do let us make haste. Ah, when are we going to begin to cast off all shame? Ho, 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 the soul does in truth pass through torments, exclaimed the voice of the plebeian, and here I suddenly sneezed. It happened suddenly and unintentionally, but the effect was striking. All became as silent as one expects it to be in a churchyard. It all vanished like a dream. A real silence of the tomb set in. I don't believe they were ashamed on account of my presence. They had made up their minds to cast off all shame. I waited 5 minutes, not a word, not a sound. It cannot be supposed that they were afraid of my informing the police, for what could the police do to them? I must conclude that they had some secret unknown to the living, which they carefully concealed from every mortal. Well, my dears, I thought, I shall visit you again, and with those words I left the cemetery. No, that I cannot admit. No, I cannot. The Bobok case does not trouble me, so that is what the Bobok signified. Depravity in such a place, depravity of the last aspirations, depravity of the sodden and the rotten corpses, and not even sparing the last moments of consciousness. Those moments have been granted, vouchsafed to them, and, worst of all, in such a place. No, that I cannot admit. I shall go to other tombs. I shall listen everywhere. Certain one ought to listen everywhere, and not merely at one spot in order to form an idea. Perhaps one may come across something reassuring. But I shall certainly go back to those. They promised their biographies and anecdotes of all sorts. Tfu! But I shall go. I shall certainly go. It is a question of conscience. I shall take it to the Citizen. The editor there has his portrait exhibited too. Maybe he will print it. That is the end of Bobok from Somebody's Diary by Fyodor Dostoevsky. More videos later.